Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harris Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and that's it, Shane. The Pac-12 is dead. That's it. We're done.
Rest in peace.
More, if there's one regret, I'm actually curious. If there's one regret that you have about the Pac-12 era from Arizona, what stands out right off the top of your head?
One regret? I had to think the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's the only thing Arizona didn't do. They had co-Pac-12 championships, just never got to the Rose Bowl. If that's the only thing, and great, the funny thing is, that's all ASU fans will talk about for the rest of eternity.
Yeah, as long as they have that.
Yeah. So 77, but yeah. Regardless, speaking of ASU, we have an interesting. Well, I guess not really, but we have an interesting guest on the program tonight, Kelley Ford, who runs his own ratings website. It will be interesting to talk about where he has Arizona rated and where he has ASU rated in football for this upcoming fall. Got a really interesting model. We'll talk to him in the second segment of the show. But Shane, I guess it's time. To get right to it. There's no live sports to talk about. We're done.
Not for Arizona. No.
Well, the whole Pac-12, Oregon State, who, by the way, cost me some money because they didn't show up against Kentucky or whatever that was.
Was that the second game where they didn't cover home plate? Let the go-ahead run in against Kentucky?
Yep. They had all of 2 hits the entire night. Wow. Great job. Way to end the Pac-12 with a bang.
Yep. Yeah. So our guy Shotgun said it ends not with a bang, but with a whimper because it was ended with a called strike right down the middle.
Oh, it was on 3 pitches. Yeah. Anyways, all right. Well, let's get right into it. This is an Arizona sports show. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's get right into Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off. And we had a great one of our listeners went and bought one of these.
Oh yeah,
and posted on Twitter. And I assume that he filled out the post-purchase survey and mentioned Wildcat Country.
Sure, he did. Yeah, and I think the one he got was the one that you'll see. And at the end of this segment, our guy Chris Gronkowski show. It's a really cool looking ice shaker. We need to get him to send us some. But yeah, these are great too. The one I got in front of me, the Wildcat Country logo, and then the one behind me as well. But you can also, if you rather just get the Arizona logo and not the Wildcat Country logo, you can do that too. So you have options.
Hey, these things are great. Going out on the golf course, it's a must every time you go. All right, let's get right into Buy or Sell. Number one, Shane, this is a good one. So Chase Budinger. Remember him from Arizona basketball, made the NBA. He is now in the Olympics in beach volleyball. He should be considered a top 5, if not higher, Arizona sports athlete over the last 20 years. Do you buy or sell that? And who else would you put in that category top of mind?
It's an interesting question. And of course, if you're thinking, excuse me, dealing with a little bit of a cold. So just as an FYI here, if you're thinking about multi-sport athletes, he probably stands alone if you're just talking the last 20 years, because if you go before that, you have to talk about Kenny Lofton, right? So everyone else is a bit apples and oranges compared to what Chase Budinger has done. But going from the NBA to another sport and excelling at that as well. But in terms of the most significant Arizona athletes the last 20 years, and you leave those things up to interpretation intentionally. I think you'd have to put Rob Gronkowski up there, maybe number 1, because he's arguably the greatest tight end in the history of the game. You have some softball players who won an Olympic gold medal, if you want to go the Olympic route. Excuse me, some basketball players who have been All-Americans in college and went on to win NBA titles. But yeah, based on his level of skill in 2 sports, Chase Budinger wasn't a star in the NBA, but he did play, I think, 7 seasons, and he's reinvented himself in beach volleyball. So I'll have to buy the premise. Yeah, it's one of those questions, Eric, you send me that, like, on the face of it, it's like, no. But then I think about it, you got a point.
I'm going to go higher, Shane. I think in the last 25 years, he might be the best overall Arizona athlete to excel in 2 different sports at such a high level. We can't talk about that with anybody else. Listen, we've had, Delaney Schnell do well in the Olympics, great, as a diver. But it's not, imagine being like a swimmer and a diver. That's what Chase Budinger is doing.
Yeah.
And, Michael Bates was one. He ran track, I believe, made the Olympics back in the 90s. I also played football, got to the NFL. But since then, I don't think that there is anyone in Arizona lore who can claim this. If you guys can think of it, let us know. Twitter, YouTube. Are we missing somebody? Chase for sure has to be top 3, top 5. And no doubt about that. And also speaking of the Olympics or Olympic related teams, how about a shout out to Tommy Lloyd, Shane, for
Yeah.
what he did coaching, was it the U18 team to a gold medal down there?
Easy 40-point win. Yeah. I mean, that was expected, but still, yeah, no, it's great. Great experience, great exposure for him. And hey, for any last minute any recruits looking to make a last minute commitment, I think Tommy's still got a roster spot or two available. So no, it was great. Congrats to him and his team for sure.
I want to ask you something. This is not on the itinerary, so I'm just throwing this one out at you. So
Uh-oh.
today it was announced that Danny Hurley is staying at UConn and not
Yep.
going to the NBA and the Lakers. So it would have been a late coaching change, which, if Arizona football fans remember from less than 6 months ago, we thought the coaching cycle was done. Nick Saban retires, Kalen
Mm.
DeBoer goes from Washington to Alabama, and we all know who Washington hired after that. Does this like relieve you, like some Arizona fans? Or are you just like, we're fine with Tommy, he's not going anywhere?
I don't think Tommy would. I mean, it's funny because yes, I know UConn are back-to-back champions, but is it an upgrade of a job? I mean, I know money always talks, but no, I didn't even really cross my mind. The only thing that crossed my mind is that if Hurley were to leave, then maybe, if Arizona has a roster spot available, maybe they want to grab one of the guys in the transfer portal. So from that perspective, I saw it as a disappointment. Plus, just the fact that UConn is going to be good for the foreseeable future and another top contender to possibly deal with in the NCAA tournament. But no, Tommy leaving for UConn is never something I considered.
Yeah, I would say more than anything, I think that's a great point, Shane, about UConn being that good. But outside of that, yeah, I wouldn't worry about Tommy. All right, how about this one? Speaking of coaches, Adia Barnes added 7 players to a roster, including transfer from national champion South Carolina and
Yep.
North Carolina. We should not really be worried anymore about Arizona women's basketball with all their turmoil, right? You buying or selling that statement?
I think the jury's still out a bit on that. I mean, the team will certainly look a lot different next season, and I think some of the most impressive looking additions beyond the ones you mentioned are the international players. You have a Serbian who is name I'm probably going to butcher, Katarina Nevic, who is the second MVP. So I'm guessing that means the runner-up MVP of the Serbia Women's Basketball Division One League. So she's played professionally. And you have a player from Germany. I'm going to butcher this one, Malian Rolf, who's competed for 4 German national teams at different age groups. So we'll see how they acclimate to the American game. We know that's been a challenge at times for Tommy Lloyd's international recruits on the men's side. But it is an impressive looking class, including the transfers, some of the top teams in the country. And with the pieces they're returning, they should at least be a tournament team again next season in their first year in the Big 12.
Yeah, and remember they have Montoya Dew, who's coming back from injuries,
That's right.
who's the number 8 overall recruit in the country, or top 10 recruit, depending on the service that you subscribe to there
Yep.
for recruiting rankings. So she's coming back. I think Adia's righted the ship here. Been very quiet. Still would like to have her on. We have not talked to her, I think, in
We're
almost 2
working
years.
on it. It's not for lack of trying. I'll just say it. I'll just say that we're working on it.
So we'd love to talk to her about, I mean, these are some big time pieces. I'm actually going to buy this one. I kind of feel like calm down a little bit. I'm not freaking out. And I know I've been hard on Adia. What's going on over there? I think she's kind of righted the ship, and she got the most out of a team that really probably didn't belong in the NCAA tournament. And they got there and they won, a round of, the play-in
Should have
game.
won 2 games, but still,
Yeah,
they got
but
there.
but that was a team that I would have said was, DOA, and they still made a postseason tournament. So,
Yeah.
good for Adia. We're going to calm down on the Adia, any criticism right now. I feel pretty good about things. All right, switch to football here. So at Harrah's Auction Casino, this is our sponsor, they have a Caesars Sportsbook there. So if you go over there, which you should this summer, it's a great place to get away and everything like that. You can go over to the betting window and you can make a bet on a couple of Arizona games before the season starts. We have some early lines here, Shane. We'll do buy or sell. Let's stick with this. Buy for Arizona, sell for the opponent. Week 1, Arizona minus 30 against New Mexico. What are you doing? Buying or selling that one?
Oh, it's never too late for me to bet against Arizona, right? And make all of our listeners angry. Gosh, it was so early. Well, first of all, I don't lines that big. I like to stay away from it in general. I mean, I'm not a betting person, but I know we make our picks every week anyway. And I probably would not take Arizona to cover, mainly because I've said this so many times, but I feel like there's still going to be a feeling out period between this new staff and the players. And I think Burt Brennan and his staff have done a great job in bringing back so many talented guys, but there's still going to be a feeling out process. Even if Arizona does take care of business against New Mexico, which they still should, You get up, say 40 points late in the game, and then you take out your starters, and New Mexico scores a couple of touchdowns and gets a backdoor cover. So I'm thinking that way. So for those two very surface level reasons at this point in the year, I guess I'm going to sell. I'm going to take New Mexico to cover.
Yeah, I'm going to sell this one too. Just new coaching staff. If Jed was there, turnover, you don't know what everybody's going to do. Now, Arizona has New Mexico's best player from last year, in Bill Krosky-Merritt, aka Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but they call him Bill. And they also have their head coach from last year, and Danny Gonzalez, on the staff.
True.
Bronco Mendenhall, good coach. Took over at UNM. I just think that's a lot of points. I'm probably going to sell that one. I think Arizona wins this game by 3 touchdowns or more as of right now, and we'll obviously make predictions closer to. It seems like a lot of points. So if you go to Caesar Sports, I'm all for betting whatever. If you want to bet against Arizona, then go for it.
And Bronco Mendenhall's a familiar name if you remember the Las Vegas Bowl in 2008.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Good point. With BYU, yeah.
Yep.
All right, other one that you can bet on that's out from Caesar Sportsbook: Arizona plus 7.5 in Week 3 on a Friday night in a non-conference game against Big 12 foe Kansas State. You buying that line or selling it?
I think it's about right at this point, being a road game anyway. If the game was in Tucson, I think maybe Arizona would be a slight favorite, if not a pick 'em. If I had to pick now again, I probably would sell for the same reason. It's still going to be early in the season. These are 2 non-conference games. I mean, even though K-State is a Big 12 opponent, it's still a non-conference game, and it's going to be Arizona's first real test of the season, and it's a big one. So I'll probably sell at this point, although I think the line is about right. And I think a nice thing about traveling to K-State early in the season is you don't have to worry about bad weather and cold and snow quite like you do later in the year, where a lot of Big 12 teams, they travel there, they're going to get buried in possibly a foot or two of snow, like is what happened. I forget which game it was, but I think it was a game at Kansas State where there was a bunch
I think it was Iowa State, Kansas State, something like that.
There was a bunch of snow on the ground, so it's good to get that trip out of the way earlier in the season. And from that perspective, Arizona's got a better shot. But I guess I'll go ahead and sell both lines at this point.
Oh, I'm buying the heck out of this one, Shane. Give me that 7.5 points. Go to Harrah's Auction, make your bets at the window, make your hundreds of dollars when Arizona covers that line, and maybe wins the game outright at Kansas State.
It's free money. You can't lose, right?
I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
We're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I just like this line, especially getting the hook there. I think Arizona can stay within a touchdown, if not win the game outright against Kansas State. It's just not buying. I mean, the Wildcats own the second longest winning streak in the country right now.
Yeah,
I know they have a new coach.
And they will very likely be on the line in that game.
Yeah, very right. They should at that point, and Michigan very well could. I think Michigan plays Texas before that, so there is a chance, Shane, that Arizona going into that game could have the longest winning streak in the country,
and it would be 9 games.
9 games.
Point. Yeah.
Yep.
Insane.
If I'm correct, if I'm correct,
the team that lost 20 in a row at some point a few years ago. I don't even want to think about how many it was, but it's crazy how quickly fortunes change in college football these days.
The week before, Texas is at Michigan, and Texas will, I believe Texas will be favored with all that Michigan has lost.
Yeah.
Arizona. I mean, just think about it. I know this is June 10th, but Shane, going into Kansas State, we're going to be talking. All right. I'm just
and what for Fox too, because that game's going to be on Friday on Fox, right?
Yeah.
That's going to, what a talker that would be for Fox all week. So I watched the nation's biggest winning streak on the line in an early non-conference matchup, but still a big game. It's crazy.
And I will say this: if Arizona were to win that game against Kansas State 2 weeks later, Arizona at Utah, I mean that's going to get some kind of treatment, whether that's on Fox and Big Noon Saturday, College Game Day. It's going to get something.
Not to mention the revenge factor, even though Jed Fish isn't there anymore, because Jed throwing that late touchdown and then skipping town and in Arizona having to deal with the fallout.
That's the one game I'm kind of like on the schedule right now. All right, let's move on. Number 4, the NCAA has approved a policy change to allow schools to place corporate logos in the middle of their football fields. You buying or selling this new allowance, let's say?
I will buy on 2 levels. So I'm hedging a little bit, but I've been a proponent for a long time, and I wrote about this in the Daily Wildcat over 20 years ago, that Arizona Stadium should get a corporate sponsor, because it's a generic name for a stadium, And why not get that revenue? And I hope that's something that Desiree Reed-Francois looks at, because it's I mean, everyone just calls it the stadium or the football stadium. It's not like it's named after, it's not like it's McHale Center, where it's named after Pop McHale. So that's one thing. I know we're not talking about that, but in terms of corporate sponsorships in general, I'm not opposed. The other thing I would say is I'm not in love with the idea of putting sponsors in the middle of the field, but as a possible alternative for those who don't want to look at it in person. I know some sports do this. The NHL, if you've been watching the Stanley Cup playoffs, they do this where along the boards they have virtual ads that look seamless. I mean, if they go to a different camera angle, you can tell they're not the same ones that people are seeing in person, but they look great and they can be switched out throughout the game. That to me would make even more sense, because then I don't know if that's an option, but I would assume it would be. So you could project those on TV. You could switch them out by quarter or by, TV timeout or whatever. And then the people in attendance wouldn't have to look at them. Hell, it might even be an incentive to actually go to the games. So from that perspective, I'm okay with it. I don't like the idea of adding more and more sponsors, especially just for tradition's sake. But I would probably be okay with, number one, I'd be okay with naming the stadium. And number two, I would be more okay with a situation where you had the virtual sponsorships, which look just as good as they would in person if you're watching on TV.
Don't care. My answer is don't care. Any extra money you can bring in, great. Sounds good to me. Right. You want to name the stadium Joe Schmo Stadium? Fine. Pay a lot of money. And that goes back to the athletic department, gets them back on the right footing and goes hopefully some towards.
That's what she was brought in for, primarily, our new athletic director.
Yeah. All right, number 5 here. This is kind of a bonus question. So you retweeted something from a Message Board Geniuses account about this poster, and I saw this before that we got to that account. On this ASU message board, this guy went through old games from like Alabama State to determine eligibility for Bill Krosky merit, to basically saying that he is not eligible because a guy that looked like him was in a jersey that had a similar number in some game, and he played in 5 games or 6 games at some D2 school or whatever. I mean, is ASU so pathetic that their fans are stooping to levels unbeknownst to normal people?
I mean, it's hardly unusual to try to to complain about this stuff, and I'm sure there are plenty of U of A people with all kinds of theories about Josan Sanan going to ASU. So, but it's one thing if it directly involves the other school. This one didn't. It's remarkable. You go back and find my Twitter and read it, because this guy seemed like he spent a day or more putting together this case for why this running back shouldn't play for Arizona. That has nothing to do with his life except for one game out of the year. And it was not just a couple sentences. It was like, hear me out. Here's a whole, it was like a detective. Like, again, I understand. I think there is a percentage of fans and I would say on both sides, to be fair, who are more obsessed with the other team losing than they are with their team winning. I think there are some, and I think there are some who do podcasts for the rival who probably feel that way. I'll just leave it at that. But this is a whole other thing. I have never seen anyone go to great lengths to try to discredit. I mean, it's not like they're about to play ASU. It's not like the guy decommitted from ASU to go play for Arizona. It's not like they're about to play ASU, and this guy shouldn't be allowed to play against us. This guy just went out on his own and did, and it's just, it's remarkable. On the one hand, yes, it's ridiculous. On the other hand, I kind of admire just the disdain in this rivalry that would drive a fan to do something like that.
This guy's a loser. I mean, your team you focus on your team, and it's not like Bill Krosky Murray, good player, but I'm not saying this guy's going to be all Big 12 either.
Yeah,
I mean, you're really
that's another thing too. It's not like it's like it wasn't like Arch Manning transferred to Arizona,
right? Or like Tedoroa McMillan, Noah Fafi, like those guys. You're talking about a running back who's good, but like I am just
that was
astounded.
Something.
All right,
it really was.
All right, so Wildcat Country is brought to you by, of course, by Harrah's Octane Casino. And don't forget, end of the month, they have their Win Your Wheels giveaway. So if you want to win a brand new car, it's time for your chance to drive one away. Harrah's Octane Casino is celebrating its 30th anniversary with the Win Your Wheels giveaway. It's your chance every month to win a new car. Just go to Harrah's Auction Casino, play your favorite slots using your Caesars Rewards card on the last Saturday of each month to win your wheels. The more you play, the more entries you'll receive. Harrah's Auction Casino, play for all. We'll have our buddy Mike Kittner on sometime this summer to tell us more about that and many things. Plus, Shane and I will be out there watching an Arizona game this fall. Hopefully, some of you will come and join us, make some bets with us at the window, and maybe sit and kind of join us on our post-game show that we will do after that. Coming up next, Kelley Ford from KFordRatings.com here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast, and I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, a brand new guest for our program. Glad to have Kelley Ford from KFordRatings.com. Obviously, he runs this website. It's a college football power ratings and resume ranking site. And he put out a great piece on Arizona on Twitter the other day, and you retweeted it on the Wildcat Country account. Really fascinating to look at. I mean, this is so deep. So we're going to have Kelley kind of explain it in layman's terms. Kelley, welcome to the program. So in your preseason version 1 of your power rankings, you have Arizona 26th. First of all, how do you come up with those power rankings, and why do you have Arizona, I would say, higher than some and maybe lower than others expect?
Well, Eric, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Shane today. And yeah, I'm excited. You say, Arizona, maybe I have them higher than some, lower than others. I'm good with that. Like, I actually spend a lot of time, refining the edges, smoothing out the edges, as I say, of my model to try to ensure that I'm minimizing the effect of outliers. And usually that means that my power ratings have a much more kind of middle feel to them for most, if not all, of the 134 FBS teams. It sounds like Arizona is no exception. So before I dive into Arizona, just to be responsive to your request there, the power ratings themselves have evolved over the years, but in the preseason, which is what we're looking at right now, the preseason version 1, as you mentioned, there's really 3 main components. And for anyone who's a fan of Bill Connolly and the SP Plus work that he does now over at ESPN, these will sound familiar. Bill and Brian Fremeau, who does FEI, those are kind of the 2 godfathers of college football analytics, in my opinion. I really kind of followed their lead in this space, and I found my own path, your own learnings as you dive into the data. But Bill and Brian really set the foundation from which a lot of people, including myself, have been able to build, I would say. And so the 3 main factors that I use in my preseason ratings are your returning production. And so that's looking at who is coming back from Arizona's team last year, and also what pieces are you adding via the transfer portal. Of course, transfers out also play a factor here, but returning production. How much production from last year are you bringing back, whether that's from your existing roster or incoming transfers? That's the biggest component. Then you're also looking at how has Arizona and all 133 other teams, how have they performed recently in the K Ford rating? So if we go back to last year, Arizona finished the year number 21 in my power ratings. That was Arizona's highest year-end finish in my power ratings of the CFP era. You go back 2 years ago, they were 73rd. 3 years ago, it was 110. So the strides that Arizona has made here in recent years, and I know Jed Fish had a lot to do with that, and I know he is off, and we've got a new one in there now, but it still stands to reason that there is some congruency, consistency with how teams have progressed in recent years, and there is some predictive power in how they will now perform this year. The third and final piece from the preseason is how well have you recruited in recent years? And I'll be honest with you guys, I've changed the weights here this year for both your recent performance because, let's be honest, how a team was 3 or 4 years ago now, how a program was, probably not quite as strong a predictor of how they will be this year as maybe it was 5-6 years ago in the pre-transfer portal era. It's so much easier to turn over an entire roster now that maybe how good you were 3-4 years ago doesn't quite matter as much. It still matters. It's still informative, but maybe not to the same level. Same thing with high school recruiting, because like I mentioned, the transfer portal is huge now. I capture that in returning production. So a lot of teams out there are doing maybe half, sometimes even more of their roster building through the portal, not using as much high school recruiting. So it's still informative. How has this team recruited in recent years? But it's not quite to the same level it was. Those are the 3 inputs: returning production, recent K Ford ratings, recent recruiting. And then as we get going in the season, that preseason weight gets phased out and it gets replaced, of course, with the all-important in-season data.
Well, Kelley, if you had Arizona ranked 110th 3 years ago, you probably had them higher than anyone else because that was one of the worst football teams I've seen in my lifetime. You mentioned your criteria, and you mentioned obviously Arizona has a new coaching staff. Do you weight that at all, or is it just kind of something that's factored in as the season goes?
So I spent a lot of time really at the end of last year, but more so in this off season here from January till about May, working on my head coach grades is what I'm calling head coaching grades. And so you'll be not surprised to learn Jetfish graded out very well in that, taking Arizona from where they were to where they are now. So that I have that piece now in my database, head coach grades. I haven't called them rankings or ratings yet. They're just grades. I want to do some work on offensive and defensive coordinators as well to really build that out. I have not added that into the model just yet for the actual power ratings for these teams. I do think I can probably improve the accuracy. I'm not sure how much, but it can probably be improved by adding that in. I'm just hesitant to add anything into the model if I haven't back tested it yet. And I have not had the opportunity to back test anything related to coaches or coordinators. Therefore, it has not made its way into the model. That's certainly on my to-do list in future years, though.
Definitely learn, like all of us, we learn as we go for sure. I know you noted, and this is what I retweeted from the Wildcat Country page. You noted Arizona plays the third easiest conference schedule in their first year in the Big 12. And that's partly because the Kansas State game is technically a non-conference game. And you actually favor Arizona to win every game outside of Utah, which is the favorite of many to win the Big 12. Which are the toughest conference games on Arizona's schedule from your perspective, aside from the Utah game, which obviously will be very difficult?
Yeah, Utah's going to be the most difficult, as you said. You know, they're number 19 in my power ratings. You have to go to Salt Lake City, catching Kansas State in the non-conference. That's actually perfect, really, for both Arizona and Kansas State. Gives you a good litmus test. You know, the winner of that game is going to be feeling really good. The loser's going to know what they need to work on, but nobody's caught that L in the conference standings just yet. So it actually works out really well, even though it's a little bit of a quirk this year with that carryover from the home and home. Other games, though, actually at TCU, I have a 44% win expectancy for Arizona in week 13. So I think that could be a tricky test. In Fort Worth, I have TCU power rated number 34. And then if I look at some other games where maybe you're closer to a 50% win expectancy, you know, on the road at UCF in week 10, coming off West Virginia at home before an off week. So maybe a tricky spot there, having to travel, you know, across the country to go to Florida, to go to Orlando there. That could be a tricky one. It's the road test there. We just said it, Utah, TCU, UCF, you know, at BYU. That's a game that I give Arizona right now about a 3-4 chance to win, 3 out of 4. So maybe not, you know, the scariest on paper, but, you know, going up there can always be challenging, especially depending on what time of day that game will be there in week 7. So that's where I'm looking. It's really the road trips. If you're looking at the home slate, you know, the most difficult or the lowest percent chance to win right now, lowest win expectancy is that home game to West Virginia, who I have power rated number 36. I right now give Arizona about a 65% chance to win that game.
You know, it's amazing just looking behind you at your power rankings, which you have up on the wall. I think of the top 13 teams, 12 are from either the Big 10 or the SEC, which is just wild. I just as an aside, you mentioned that Arizona was number 21 in your final rankings last year, yet they ended the season with the second longest winning streak in the country behind Michigan. Why so low?
So Arizona was a team, Eric. It's a great question. Arizona was a team that improved more than any other team over the course of last year. From my preseason power ratings to my year end, no team experienced a larger jump in Kelley Ford rating than Arizona. So there is a component of Arizona being tied down, if you will, last year because of the preseason weight, because of what this program had been in recent years. I mentioned that gets phased out throughout the course of the year. It never totally goes away. So I've tested many different phase out approaches. The most accurate through my back testing has been to keep that in throughout the year. It's very, very small by the end of the year, but to keep that in. The offense was fantastic, number 10 in the country for me last year. It was the defense that held Arizona back a little bit. Had you guys number 38 year end in the defensive unit power rating. So again, number 38, that's the best defense you guys have had in the CFP era going all the way back to 2014. So it was really good. I mean, the year before it was number 124. So it's hard for me to say anything bad about Arizona, but from where they started to where they finished, they made up a ton of ground and they were held back by the preseason weight, very little, and then also that defense.
All right, that makes sense. I understand that. When it comes to the coaching change, Jedd Fisch to Brent Brennan, if Jedd Fisch had stayed, would Arizona be a lot higher than 26th in your rankings? Or does Brent's experience at San Jose State, where he had some success, maybe kind of bridge that gap?
I think you can say that the gap is bridged a little bit, but remember, I don't have coaching specifics built into the model. So I do think it's fair to say if Jedd Fisch was still there, Arizona would likely be projecting higher right now. largely because more of the roster would be intact, is my guess. We don't know that for certain, but I would think that maybe a better opportunity to keep talent there that was there, even bring in and attract more talent via the transfer portal. Say, hey, look what we're building here in Tucson. Not that you're not able to do that now, but anytime you have a coaching change, you do see players leave the program. So probably fair to say Arizona might be a little bit higher. But again, without having the coaching grades tied in directly to the model right now, Arizona wasn't necessarily quote unquote punished for the coaching change.
I know, Kelley, you project Arizona's offense and defense, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but you have them both taking a step back from their rankings last year, albeit just slightly on offense and a little bit more on defense. Is that primarily just based on the personnel they lost, or are there other factors in play?
Yeah, so I'm looking at I pulled up my returning production numbers here too. So it looks like on offense, you're bringing back top 40-ish in returning production nationally. Defense a little bit lower than that, top 60, 65-ish there. I think it's safe to attribute a little bit of this expected regression to what Arizona has been really until last year in the CFP era. Like I said, jumping from 110 to 73 to 21. We don't often see that type of progress made over such a short period of time continue to extrapolate. Like that's uncommon. I'm not suggesting Arizona can't do it. This model is also not all encompassing. That's a really important point that I always make to people. There are lots of things that the model cannot capture about a team, about a player, a coach, of course, as I've talked about, but there's intangibles in and around a program that the model can't see, doesn't feel. So it's possible that all those intangibles are going to work in Arizona's favor this year, and it will, again, exceed the model's expectations. But as the model looks at this program objectively through the same lens that it's viewing all 134 teams, it says, all right, this program has improved massively over the course of the last couple years. We don't expect them to fall off a cliff, but it's more likely than not, given the production that the model sees. Again, it's looking very blankly, doesn't see names, doesn't see profiled, it sees stats, and then we adjust those for opponents played and competition faced. That's what it sees, and it says maybe a slight step back from last year, which was the best team we've seen on both offense, defense, and overall in the CFP era. So I'm still high on Arizona. I don't want that to get lost. I've got Arizona number 3 in my projected Big 12 standings this year, behind only Kansas State and Utah. And I mean, a half game separates Utah and Arizona in my projected standings for second place. So it is well within the realm of possibility. I would even say, you could make the case that Arizona could or should be in that top 2 right now. This is a team I expect to be coming into the Big 12 and contending right away. Another thing that's not seen by the model or really talked about enough, and maybe this impact is lessened in the Big 12 because 8 of the 16 members are new within the last 12 months at this point. But anytime you transition into a new conference, granted from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, likely not a huge shock to the Arizona team and to that program. But anytime you transition to a new conference, it might take a minute to adjust, feel things out, and see how it's going. Now, Arizona's coming in, like I said, with a lot of other new members, so maybe that effect is dampened a little bit here, but that's something that I don't think is talked about enough as conference realignment continues to shift and evolve. It is not overly common for a team to come in right away and have massive success. It can happen. It has happened, but more times than not, it takes a year or two to transition into that new league.
And that's fair enough. And a 16-team league, there's a less margin for error anyway. Last question for you, Kelley. Learned a lot. Appreciate you joining us. A realistic best case and worst case scenario for Arizona. I know you have them penciled in as the third best in the Big 12. If they exceed your expectations or if they don't, like what's realistically best case, worst case for Arizona?
I'll say, best case. I don't want to sell them short. I want to say 11-1, but I think 10-2 is probably. Like I'd be thrilled if I was an Arizona fan. 10-2 against this schedule.
Me too.
I think 10-2. I'm going to say that's best case, and I might be wrong because 11-1. There's a 4% chance by my numbers that Arizona goes 11-1 or better. So that's not nothing, but it's a small chance. I'll say 10-2, and then I'd say the floor. And you're probably disappointed if this happens. I mean, 7-5. That's probably the floor. I don't expect that. I don't. But there's an 88% chance that Arizona wins 7+ regular season games by my number. So there's a 12% chance you fall short of that. Not calling for it. Don't expect that. But you've got some tricky games in there, and so I would say anywhere between 7 and 10 wins is probably the range that I'm looking at for Arizona. I know that's a big range. My guess is that 8 or 9. Like I think 8 or 9.
Yeah.
That's probably where I'd be.
I'll just say real quick here. If you told Eric and I 3 years ago that 7-5 was the floor for this team, we would be absolutely thrilled. So we'll take that every day of the week.
Yeah, we've done this podcast for 4 years, and we started, and they were 0-5. They lost 70-7 to ASU, and things have turned around. So you know what? Well, 7-5, make a bowl game. I know a lot of fans will be disappointed. I won't be. All right, two questions for you. When it comes to, I work in the sports betting space, and you have all these power rankings on a weekly basis. Is there anything on your website that helps on a weekly basis in predicting games based on spreads? Like, can I go to kfordratings.com and like find stuff that, can help me win money in betting?
So I work in college athletics. I work at a Division I conference office. So gambling, sport wagering is not something that I am allowed to participate in. I also actually, quite frankly, don't even have the desire to do that, even if I could. I do know that's very popular. A lot of people like that.
Okay.
This is the first year, Eric, that I have not included a projected line on my team graphics. I've done that in years past. If you really, because I'm trying to distance myself from the sport gambling, but there's so many people out there that enjoy my content that do use it for that purpose. I've heard good reviews from them, which is encouraging. If you really want that, you can go to kfordratings.com. It's on the power tab. You can see the power rating of every single team that's listed there. That power rating is presented on a points per game above or below FBS average scale. So for example, if I go there right now, really, really quickly, we can see that I have Georgia power rated number 1 at 32.9. Let me find Arizona at number 26, 9.7. So Arizona, 9.7 points better than the average FBS team on a neutral field. If you really wanted to determine what's the K Ford line on this game, find the differential between the two and apply your home field advantage. For the first time this year, I have a variable home field advantage baked into the model. So every single venue has a different value. In previous years, I'd use like kind of a standard 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, depending on what the data said. So you can apply whatever home field you want, but I can give you the objective K Ford rating, power rating on a points per game above or below FBS average for every single team. Find that differential, apply your home field advantage as you feel is appropriate, and compare that to the Vegas line. I do know some people have had success with that, and if you choose to do that, I certainly wish you the best of luck, but I'm obligated to say that is not what the power ratings are intended to do.
I respect it. I appreciate it. Any assets that, we can find, great. No problem at all. All right, last question for you. You have this great website. And by the way, I just want to point out, people who go to the website, I'm going to give them a spoiler alert. The team you have picked last in the Big 12, ASU. Just want to point that out, which is good to see. What else can people find on there? And just tell us more about, what you want people to know about kfordratings.com.
Yeah, so kfordratings.com, again, I appreciate you guys having me on. This is great. It gets populated throughout the college football season on a weekly basis with tons of different stuff. Right now, there's not a lot of, I'm building more and more every single day on there as I'm releasing the information out, but it, of course, is most useful and most informative during the college football season, but included on there, you'll find my power ratings, as I just talked about, for all 134 FBS teams. You'll find the projections for every single team, for every single projected conference standings. I'm releasing those one day at a time. All the power fours are out there now. I'm getting into the group of 5 or group of 6, whatever we're calling them these days. So those will be on there. My most deserving rankings will be on there as soon as we start the season. That's actually my favorite application of the ratings. I'm able to look at a team's schedule, their record, and say, okay, how much have they accomplished this year relative to what would be expected of the average top 25 team or the number 12 team in the country against that schedule? It allows me to generate my own objective rankings for every single team. Debating the ranking of college football teams is like one of the best things about our sport, and everybody has a take. This is my way to objectively view it. So the most deserving page gets a lot of hits during the year. That's my favorite. I have the what if tab. So basically, what if every single FBS or every single college football game that ended in a 1 possession game, so 8 points or less, what if that result was flipped? What would everybody's record be? What would the most deserving rankings look like? I do that as well during the season. Wow. I put out some information about college football playoff, who are the contenders, what are their chances to make the playoff, all that. That'll all be populated here throughout the summer. And then finally, the watchability page. Every single game, every single week gets a watchability score on a scale of 0 to 10. And that really, I put it out in a graphic form based on TV window. Hey, if you've got limited screens, here's the games that I recommend you turn on, because based on my model and kind of what we're looking for in terms of, competitiveness and quality, these are going to be the quote unquote best games of these windows. I also do some college basketball power rating during the year, which can be found on the website as well. Arizona, you guys want to talk college basketball during that season? There's one that you don't have to worry about. Whatever 7-5 win percentage is, no, we're talking 11-1, 12-0 for that Arizona men's basketball team. So
we'll see in the Big 12. We'll see in the Big 12 now. since it's such a tough conference. But Kelley, you are way smarter than I am. Just great to be able to have you on the program, and really look forward to talking to you, hopefully again during football season and basketball season, so we can get your thoughts on Arizona football and basketball in progress.
Well, Eric, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Boy, what a great guest having Kelley on the program, Shane. Really cool to get his perspective. I mean, just that analysis. I mean, the guy, as I said at the end, man, this guy's smart.
Yeah. And I thought, I think I misread it because I thought he had Arizona favored in all but one Big 12 game. I think there's two who actually are an underdog, but still, he has them at least almost 50-50 to win every game except for the Utah game. So there's less margin for error in the Big 12, even though the Big 12 definitely looks more winnable than the Pac-12 has. For Arizona, 16 teams instead of 12. So you could probably get away with one loss, maybe two if you win all kinds of tiebreakers. But you lose that Utah game, you probably have to run the table to get into the Big 12 championship game. But definitely check him out. A lot of great information, and we're definitely, if he's willing, going to have him on again during the season.
All right, let's talk about our series that we're doing this summer as far as kind of memories from a certain Arizona sports year. And the year that was chosen this year is 2002, 2003. I think that was your junior year, something like that?
It was more, I think probably technically my second junior year. I was on the 5-year plan at Arizona.
All right, fair enough. All right, no, that makes sense. Okay. I think that was the year that you and I overlapped on the Daily Wildcat, my brief stint on the Daily Wildcat.
You know what? I think we might have missed each other because I think I was there for about a year and I was out for a year, and then I came on my final year at Arizona 03-04. I was the assistant sports editor both of those semesters. So
I was there for a flash. We'll just say that, and then I went to camp radio. Yeah. All right. So 02-03. There was not a lot of memories that stand out. What do you got for us?
Well, that team, and I had to go back and look because I had to refresh my memory a bit. That team was arguably the best Arizona team. And I say arguably, but definitely in the discussion to not make the Final Four. I would agree with that. They were ranked number one in the country for a good chunk of the season. They went 17-1 in the Pac-10, which back then was even more difficult than it would have been more recently, back when the Pac-12 existed. The game I remember best from that season was their double overtime win over Gonzaga in the second round of the tournament. That game took a few years off my life, as I'm sure it did yours. I had a class with Jason Rainey, if you remember him. He was at the end of the bench guy for that team. Him and Phil Torres. I remember talking to him about a couple of days later about how crazy that was. I mean, he was watching from the bench, but he was right there for all of it. But look, that team had Andre Iguodala coming off the bench. That tells you how stacked it was. It had Luke Walton, Jason Gardner, Salim Stoudemire, Channing Frye. That team was one of what would be many teams to come that have come painfully short of reaching the Final Four in the last 20 plus years, because they ended up losing to Kansas in the Elite Eight. They had a 3-pointer that would have tied it late, missed the mark. And that's one of, I want to say 5 instances in the last 23, 24 years that Arizona came that close to getting to the Final Four.
What I remember about that season, we're on the same game here, and that's the Arizona Gonzaga game, March 22nd, 2003. It's funny, I remember exactly where I was sitting watching that game. I was at a sports bar in Scottsdale that's still open, and it still looks the exact same, called Goldie's. And I remember the table I was at, and I remember that after the Blake step, who was the point guard for Gonzaga, and he missed the runner, and Luke Walton grabbed the ball and fell on the court. I remember I literally ran around the bar, and it was probably the only time in my entire life that I've acted like an extreme jacket. Maybe not the only time, but up there where I ran around, it was so stressful. Yeah. And I thought, this is a team of destiny at this point. You get by Gonzaga in Salt Lake City. They went and took care of business against Notre Dame. That really wasn't close.
That was a Pat Garrity's team, wasn't it? in Notre Dame?
I think it might have been.
I think Pat Garrity's on that team. Yeah.
And also, I think Dennis Lattimore, who was a former Arizona player, went to Notre Dame. He was there. He was a Salim Stoudemire and Channing Frye in that class. Isaiah Fox in that class. He transferred out. And I think he and Will Bynum were the two that transferred out. Okay. And Bynum went to Georgia Tech. Dennis Lattimore went to Notre Dame. So that was one there. I have to go back and double check that he played in that game. I assume that he did. And then obviously that game, March 29th, 2003, where they lost to Kansas. I mean, it's like that set us up for the next 20 plus years of Arizona basketball.
As painful as that was, it got even worse 2 years later, and then three times in the Sean Miller era. But yeah, it goes back to the unpredictable nature of the tournament. I mean, Arizona was one of the best teams in the country all season. And then they nearly get bounced in the second round by an 8 seed, and they lose in the Elite Eight anyway. So it comes down to one game. You play one bad game, one bad half, and you're done. But that was if that team went on to win the championship, or at least get the championship game, they might have been remembered as the best ever.
Shane, I think that game against Kansas is kind of what changed the fortunes of Arizona basketball. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think it's true. Because since before then, you're talking about like Arizona basketball, when they moved on, they were winning. You know, I know they lost to a really good Duke team in the national championship game, but they were making Final Fours, 88. You know, they got there, 94, 97, 2001. I mean, they were getting there. That 03 team was loaded. Jason Gardner, Luke Walton, Rick Anderson, Salim Stoudemire, Channing Frye. I mean, loaded.
Yeah.
And then they do that. And then Arizona has never gotten further than that ever since. So we're just kind of like used to disappointment. And I feel like that's the game that kind of got us used in this current frame of mind.
Well, I mean, and I don't think that's what was the launching point for it. It just happens to be the first one of many. I mean, I think you could certainly say, and I don't even want to talk about it anymore because I don't think anyone wants to hear about it, but the one 2 years later, I would say, was more painful than that.
Oh yeah.
And then of course the first one against Wisconsin, you can talk about, you could just about every instance in which Arizona's been in the Elite Eight over the last 20 something years. It was just one knife to the heart after another. So
Connecticut game where they had a chance to win. I mean,
twice. Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
I mean, just, all right. We won't depress you even more.
We're supposed to be talking about our favorite memories.
Yeah. Favorite. Oh, but I mean, the Gonzaga game was an all time.
It was.
I mean, you talk about like top 5 Arizona basketball games over the last 25 years.
Absolutely.
That one.
And a precursor of what was to come in that rivalry for sure.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. And now look who's coaching Arizona. Somebody that was on the bench in that
you
game.
You can see probably find a very young Tommy Lloyd on the bench if you go back and watch that game. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd love to, not that he'll ever come on the podcast, which he said that he wouldn't, but I would love to ask him about his memory from that game. But want to thank Kelley Ford, great guest, his debut appearance on Wildcat Country. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.